Welcome, everybody. It is December 22nd, 2020. Welcome to Indivisible TX Lege Live. We are really excited to be with you today on this Tuesday, and we have an amazing panel of guests, as you can see. And really, I should correct myself because these are more than just guests. These are fellow Indivisible TX Lege organizers and leaders that are doing some of the most amazing work that's going to be needed for this upcoming Lege session. And so today we're going to talk about our Issue Huddles. And with us are some of our Issue Huddle leaders. And before I introduce everybody and we start diving into the conversation we have planned for all of you, I want to share a little bit of information around our structure and how we are formed so that you can see how important issue huddles are to our organizing structure. So within the Indivisible TX Lege structure, we really have three big components: our issue huddles, our local SD and HD groups, and our all group support. And right now we're in the process. We kind of reference after the election and during this time before the Lege session, our recruitment and onboarding teams really go into hyperdrive because it's the transition of after an election. And as we shared yesterday, the desire from everyone is to really start powering down during this time of year. There's Thanksgiving, there's the holidays, there's New Year's. We've been in a year that is unlike any year, and we all want to shut it down. But when you're part of organizing and working for advocacy within the state legislature of Texas, this is the time to actually start ramping up. And so it's a little counterintuitive, but we're really excited with our issue huddles that we have, which is democracy, education, reproductive rights, environment, immigration, healthcare, criminal justice, LGBTQIA+, and disability justice. And the reason they're color-coded the way they are because it represents, we have leaders for every one of those huddles, which we are super excited about. And so, as I mentioned, some of those leaders are with us today, and we're gonna have a great conversation around the work that they have been doing, the work that's ahead of them in this upcoming Lege session. So first, welcome Huddle leaders. Great to see all of you. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well. Hey, Alex.
Thank you, Craig.
Doing well, thank you.
Well, we are going to start off with education. Robert Norris, you are one of the Huddle leaders for education. Talk to us about why this Huddle is the area that you kind of focused on.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really so fortunate to be part of Indivisible TX Lege. It's a great organization. It's one that if you participate in, you will find a very wonderful group of people to work with. It's a great learning experience. I can't say enough about it, and I think you should join it. Now, the Education Huddle is going to be one where, well, like the name says, we're going to be learning as we go along, and we're going to be working in an area that is important to everybody. It's important for students, teachers, parents, families, everybody. And, education is incredibly important to the legislature. It takes up most of the state budget. Every member of the legislature has a school district in their legislative district. It's not like a prison or a highway. Everyone has a school district, so they all care about it. It's easy to get their attention when you talk about these issues. And what our huddle is going to do is we're going to focus a lot on how the current issues are affecting students and the education of students. That's going to mean how they're dealing with the pandemic, how teachers are having to deal with safety issues, with personal protective equipment, having to do new forms of education. We're going to be very, very concerned about maintaining good levels of funding and also making sure that there are, equal rights for student populations. So, those are some of the things that we're going to be doing. But I really want, this huddle and a lot of other huddles are going to be all about empowering our group, TX Lege, and activists and local indivisible groups in getting involved in lobbying about education policy.
Well, Robert, before I hand off to one of our next leaders, I'd love the background that you bring to the table. If you can quickly just share the amazing experience you have when it comes to the state legislature.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm not sure my kids would agree with you about amazing, but because I spent a lot of time down at the legislature and at the Capitol. But I will say, I worked at the Legislative Budget Board for 30 years. Like their middle name implies, they're all about the budget. It's like what George Bush once said, gosh, that document has a lot of numbers in it. It must be the budget. And it does. And it's all about numbers. But we were all about working with the legislature from, super smart to super crazy members. We had to work with all of them. And I learned a lot, not only about how the legislature functions, but about how state agencies function and how they deal with important policy issues. So, like I say, I did that for 30 years. I retired in 2017. My friends that work at the LBB said, Robert, you retired at just the right time. So, I got out, I'm doing what I'm doing now. And after a few years out, I decided, I ought to put all that experience to good use. Somebody told me about TX Lege, and I got involved with it last time around with my friends at Rosedale Huddle, the local indivisible group. So that's pretty much my story.
Awesome. Always great to have you, Robert. Your experience is amazing, and kudos to leading the education huddle. I want to next highlight our environment huddle lead, Heiko Stang. Heiko, this is second go around for you. What keeps you focused on environment? Why is this issue important for you?
So first of all, I totally agree with what Robert said about our group. I joined 2 years ago, and it was really a great experience. I didn't know much about the Texas legislature, but it was a really great learning experience and all the support I got. So why I'm interested in environment, I grew up in West Germany in the 1980s, and the connection between environment and social justice was always very close to what I'm interested in. And this is exactly what we are doing. And I would say that looking at the environment, how it's connected to social justice is at the core of any progressive agenda. And that's basically what we are doing in our huddle. And if you look at Texas, you have the oil and gas industry, and it has such an outsized role that last session, what we basically always did was fighting bad bills. And sometimes we were successful, sometimes we were not. And I hope this session will be better than last one. And like we inch forward in limiting the influence of the fossil fuel industry.
Awesome. Heiko, I'm so glad that you are here for another session. Really excited about what we're going to be able to do with environment advocacy. Next up, I want to highlight Lauren Ortel. You talked about, Heiko, the connection with social justice and environment, and Lauren is leading our huddle around criminal justice. Lauren, why is this issue the one that you want to focus on? And feel free to share some of your background as well.
Sure. So I've been in the justice advocacy community for about 5 years now. I was the director of policy and organizing at Texas Inmate Families Association before I switched to Indivisible. And I've been doing justice policy work at the state and local levels with Austin Justice Coalition since 2016. Personally, I'm a survivor and I have multiple loved ones in Texas prisons. So I'm really passionate about addressing the injustices within our criminal legal system, focusing on transformative justice and decarceration advocacy.
Awesome. Great to have you, Lauren, and all of that experience you bring. Next up, I want to highlight another organizer that is going for the second round with Indivisible, but has been involved, and that's Vanessa McDougall, the leader of our immigration huddle. Vanessa, why is this issue the one that you want to focus on? And feel free to share some of your background as well.
Sure. Okay, so I've been involved in Indivisible TX Lege since 2017, and I agree with Robert that it's a great organization and you should join it. And because a lot of decisions that affect our lives on a daily basis are made at the state level, but a lot of people don't realize that, so there's not as much money and time spent trying to influence it. And our state legislators are also a lot more accessible than the national Congress. So so it's just a lot. I feel like it can be a lot easier to move the conversation or to influence things at the state level. And I'm passionate about immigration because other than Native Americans, all of us come from an immigrant background, whether it's recent or farther back. And Texas has a large immigrant population. It's an important issue. And so for this session, our main focus is on repealing what's called the Show Me Your Papers bill from 2017. It's also known as SB4. And there are already two bills filed to do that, one in the Senate and one in the House. And so that's the promising sign that this idea has legs, and it's important because we're all less safe when people don't dare to go to the police because of the immigration status of the people involved.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Next up, I want to highlight our Issue Huddle leader for the LGBTQIA plus group, Ash Hall. Tell us why this issue is so important to you, and if you want to share some of your background as well, feel free.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Ash Hall. I'm a non-binary Texan myself, so I'm in the community. My pronouns are they, them. And as such, I tend to find that I end up being subject to targeting by Republican lawmakers in particular who kind of like to go after the most marginalized folks in our community, and that tends to be the trans community. So I'm approaching my 6th, I think, legislative session now, where I've been involved in playing defense and stopping bad bills from passing. I've found as we go on that folks are targeting the transgender community more and more, and because less folks in Texas know folks who are transgender as opposed to gay or lesbian or bisexual, there's going to need to be a strong role that we as legislative advocates play in providing protection and making sure that folks are safe. So there's nowhere else that I would rather be. I think that Indivisible TX Lege is going to be a great spot for all of us to come together and provide protection to each other, exchange information, and make sure that community members who normally wouldn't even be involved in this process learn how they can get involved and actually make their voices heard. So I am excited to pull from folks throughout the state and the community, teach them how to make their voices heard, and have them go out there and make it clear that we're not going to just sit here and let folks come after us.
Awesome, Ash. Definitely happy to have you a part of this effort and the amazing work and the experience you bring to the table. Our next panelist that we have for today is our Issue Huddle leader for Reproductive Rights, and that is Cheryl Foster. Cheryl, talk to us why this issue is the issue that you want to focus your energy around, and feel free to share any of your background if you like.
Sure. I've been involved or interested in reproductive rights for decades. I got politically and financially interested after my Planned Parenthood was bombed. That will tend to tick you off and get you involved. And so I've been working with recently in getting into TX Lege. I was working at I'm in Waco, and I was working with the Syntax Action Network, which is our local Indivisible group, which got plugged into Indivisible TX Lege, which now I'm here working on reproductive rights with y'all. I have been down in Austin. I can't even count the number of times doing testimonies and office visits, and all of which means absolutely nothing in 2020 because we don't know how this is all going to work. But I've been working with obviously Planned Parenthood, the T Fund, NARAL, Jane's Due Process, all sorts of advocacy work for reproductive rights for the last 10 years here in Texas.
So I hope everyone who's able to watch this, whether you're watching it now live or you catch it afterwards, that there's an amazing group of leaders. And this is just a part of the leadership that is really doing a lot of amazing work in Indivisible TX Lege. And we really want to emphasize that this is now the opportunity to jump in. If you want to take action, if you want to be a part of an organization that is trying to do work, if you want to be a liaison from the organization you work with so that we are connected and we are plugged in with each other, now's the time to let us know, to get connected. Let's build those relationships. Let's get you onboarded. We really want to recruit any Texan that is interested in doing the good work that needs to be done for every Texan at the legislative session. And so how do you join us? Well, I'm going to highlight really quickly the join us page that we have on our website so that you can see the process that you can join us. So let me share my screen here real quick for everybody. Okay, our Indivisible TX Lege website is indivisibletexlege.org. It's in our post, and you can go to the Join Us link that we have on our website. And within Join Us, there's a couple of different options to make sure you're first plugged in. Sign up for our email list. Make sure you're following us on our Facebook public page. Join our closed Facebook group to be a part of the conversation there. Whether you're doing work with another organization or you just want to be plugged in with information that's being shared. Follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel. But to join the team, to join an issue huddle, if there's one of the issues that we're highlighting today that you care deeply about and you want to do work in at the state level, fill out our Join Us form. You don't have to fill out every single field. There's a few things that are required just so we make sure we have, contact information and some foundational information for you. But the rest of the fields, you can fill out whatever is relevant to you so that we can then have an organizer, which actually will be the amazing Sharon Kramer out of Denton, who will reach out to you so that y'all can have a conversation. And then she can help onboard you and get you connected to everything you need to be connected with to be a part of Indivisible TX Lege. And so we are actively recruiting for people to join our issue huddles and the amazing leaders that we've been able to highlight here so far so that you can help them do the work that they're going to be talking about here in a little bit more detail. And that could be tasks that are just, you've got a couple of hours to be able to chip in or an hour a week to chip in to do certain things. Or if there's real organizing that you want to be a part of, you can really help with some of those functions. So to highlight some of that work, I want to hand off to Robert, our Education Huddle lead, to kind of share some of the information and what you guys are looking at with the Education Huddle, the partners, to kind of show people the amount of potential impact we can have in the work that we're trying to line up for this legislative session.
All right, to do that, I want to share a document that we have been working from. Just a minute, please. Sorry. There we go. This is kind of strange.
Just a heads up, Robert, we do see your desktop, and now I see your Google Chrome opening up.
Okay.
All right, I see your Education Huddle document. So if you want to maximize and zoom in a little bit.
This was in a better form a minute ago. Okay, can y'all see
Perfect.
that? All right,
Perfect.
good. Okay, so we did have just a minute, please. Humor me for just a sec. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I'm sorry. I had this document up and running a minute ago, and now it's not cooperating. Okay, well, we'll work off of this one for now. So the education huddle is really going to be all about sort of the basic mission of education itself, or at least it should be, and that's equitable access to an excellent education for all students. We're going to be working with allied organizations, what we're calling like-minded organizations, providing education resources and supporting actions. That's going to be working with associations, teacher associations, advocates like Just Fund It. Our top priority issues for this session are going to be making sure that the commitment the legislature made last session in 2019 through House Bill 3 to pump in about $5 billion into public education. A lot of that to be used for increasing compensation for teachers and other educators. We want them to maintain that funding because there's the kind of countervailing interest in trying to find savings to deal with the budget deficit. So we want to make sure that they're going to maintain that funding and also find ways to increase state funding to raise the state share. As I mentioned a minute ago, the issue that's going to be front and center for the legislature in education is going to be how school districts have dealt with the pandemic. And the fact that that's really stretched their resources, made them very, very quickly turn on a dime and deal with some important and really, really critical issues like safety, their personal protective equipment, the way that the facilities operate, and also educate in new ways through virtual education, finding out if they can do more in broadband access. This whole area is going to take up most of the attention, I know, and oxygen during this beginning of the session and maybe all the way through it. One of the things that have come to light during this whole thing is problems related to the accountability system. You've been talking and hearing about delaying or at least putting off, one semester, maybe 2 semesters of the STAR test. The STAR test comes in and acts as a big accountability as well as stress factor for students and teachers every semester. And it's something that you just can't do adequately with the pandemic environment that they're in right now. So they have, the TEA has said, okay, we're going to continue to do the testing. We just won't do any A to F ratings on the school districts. So we don't want them to do the testing either. Charter schools are a big issue that you've probably heard about. They drain away funding and students from regular public schools. And, we're going to be working with important allied organizations. There's Raise Your Hand Texas, Every Texan, the teacher associations like Texas AFT, and, really working with them because they produce a lot of very, very valuable research and information that we can benefit from in terms of taking that, distilling it down to calls to action, one-pagers, and pushing that out so that local indivisible groups can use it during the session to make sure that the education system improves and doesn't backtrack on any of its work. Something that's near and dear to my heart because I have 3 children is, and I don't know how much we're going to be able to invest in this, is simply to make sure that there are adequate protections for special populations of students, minority students, LGBT students, disabled students. That's something that I do want our huddle to look at, even though it may not be coming to the fore. And another thing that, they're going to have to look at is mental health services, because COVID has brought in a stress factor, and it's even compounded for students who are experiencing challenges already in the public schools. So those are some of the things we're going to do. A lot of it's going to be monitoring legislation, supporting good legislation, and opposing bad legislation as we go along. So I hope that fills in and shows you some of the work we're doing. If you have questions or need more information, we have a really complete document that I can share with you.
Awesome, Robert. Really excited about the opportunity for the Education Huddle to, really get people engaged, to let them know the opportunities and the priorities so that they can be a part of letting our legislators know, what we expect as Texans. I want to pivot to, let's see, we'll go ahead and start sharing this. Thanks, Robert. And
Sure.
thanks for that update on the Education Huddle. Now, you mentioned in your sharing, around partners and making sure that we have, we're connected with the different allied and advocacy groups that are doing good work. And I want to hand off to Lauren, who's the Huddle leader for the criminal justice, around the coalition work that you've been doing and the importance of that coalition work and what you see is happening within that space.
Yes, definitely. So this huddle within the Indivisible TX Lege group might be a little bit different from how most of the other huddles were created. But this is going to be essentially a supportive group of the Texas Lege Justice Advocacy Coalition. This coalition is made up of about 15 different partner organizations, and that number keeps growing as we're bringing in more folks. It is centered around the experiences of those directly impacted by our justice system. Some of those groups include Grassroots Leadership, Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, Austin Justice Coalition, Texas Fair Defense Project, Texas Appleseed, and all kinds of other folks doing great work. We will be meeting weekly during session to share updates on each other's bills that we're focusing on, discuss strategy, and identify calls to action. So the Huddle members will be there to support that work by going through the different priorities, pulling out those calls to action that we want to bring into the Indivisible Texas Lege space. There's a great weekly newsletter that comes from that with calls to action, as well as, we've got Twitter followers, a Facebook group, general email list, all kinds of ways to reach out about calls to action. And so this huddle will be about supporting that work and helping get the word out about all of the progress that these important bills are making.
Awesome. And Lauren, criminal justice is definitely something that has always been needed, unfortunately, because of the amount of injustice that we see within it. And I know for Indivisible TX Lege, we hope to, be a part of that work to see how we can highlight and elevate it. But this is really the first session that we're going to have a formalized criminal justice huddle group and the coalition that you mentioned and all the partners coming together so that we can stay informed and figure out how to collaborate and help support each other. So it's really exciting to see where this huddle is going to be able to impact and the work that is being started within this space and how we can grow in bringing more people into helping support criminal justice reform or anything else that these partners are really highlighting for us.
Definitely. I'm excited about it, connecting different groups. As was mentioned before, the issue of justice in general has a lot of crossover into other issue areas, other huddles here. So there will be a good amount of opportunity for collaboration. When it comes to criminal justice specifically, it is one of those rare issue areas that actually can be bipartisan. And so there are some folks in the Texas legislature that are absolutely awful on our other issue huddles. They might file or sign on to a really good justice bill. So sometimes, it's tough, the folks that you end up working with, but knowing that it can be a part of reducing a lot of the the preventable suffering that's happening with our criminal legal system. So that's what keeps us motivated. We've got this big end goal of seeing a completely different world. And up until then, we want to do everything we can, all those small steps to relieve and reduce some of that suffering.
Super exciting, Lauren. I can't wait to see what's going to happen within this space. Next, I want to hand off to Heiko, our Environment Huddle lead, and to talk about, what are some of the things that we can, anticipate, or what's some of the targets for the Environment Huddle?
Okay, I start with what should be the most important thing, the climate crisis. So in the last session, there was a bill filed that would establish a commission to look at how we can mitigate climate change in Texas. But this went nowhere. So basically, the legislature refused to acknowledge that there even is a problem. So our hope for this session is they acknowledge that there is something called climate change. That would be the first one. And the second one is a stronger and more transparent TCEQ. So the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality must finally take its role seriously to regulate industry. And one example is last session, a bill failed that would have made penalties appropriate to the kind of violation businesses committed. So right now, businesses just see penalties as a part of doing business. And so the TCEQ needs reform. And this also relates to our third priority, the Texas Railroad Commission. This is right now a rubber stamping agency for the fossil fuel industry. And they do not really enforce regulations. One example is flaring. This isn't really stopped. It happens as businesses choose it to happen. And water and water quality would be another issue we will consider, because water is a scarce resource in Texas, and its quality and quantity needs to be protected. And finally, we will be looking at how vulnerable communities are connected to environmental issues. If you look at the coast, South Texas, the Permian Basin, many of the groups who are primarily suffering from environmental degradation are basically the same ones who suffer in other areas outside of the environment. So these are our top 5 priorities. And
Awesome.
yeah.
No, go ahead, Heiko. Sorry.
Coordinate basically with the Sierra Club. They were our most important ally last session. And other organizations is like Texas Campaign for the Environment and other local, regional, and statewide groups.
Yeah, I love what you said, Heiko, is first making sure that we acknowledge that we have a climate crisis and that we need to do something about it. That's going to be such an important step of elevating the needs for environment change or environment policy so that we can see progress for Texans in all of these areas that you're talking about. And so really excited about the Environment Huddle helping elevate the voice of environment partners, like you mentioned, Sierra Club or any other agencies or local groups, as well as the work that we'll be able to do to really pressure and communicate to legislators around the importance of environment work. So really excited, Heiko, for that work.
We are always open to include more allies. They could be local, they could be regional. So we are open to anyone who wants to cooperate and push good bills, prevent bad bills.
Yeah, and that's a great call for our audience as well. We're talking about recruitment. We want you to join Indivisible TX Lege, but if you're part of an organization that is aligned with these issues, that is trying to do the good work to help Texas get to that brighter place that we all hope for, and that better place that our state can be, contact us, let us know, reach out to us via Facebook, Twitter, whatever platform that you would like, and we will get you connected with these different issue huddle leaders so that we can all be informed and be connected. Next, I want to highlight Vanessa, our immigration huddle lead. Vanessa, share what you shared a little bit in your introduction around overturning SB4, which I agree would be huge. When that was passed, it was so just frustrating, angry. There's emotions I can't even articulate right now because of that bill being in existence. What else do you guys see for this upcoming legislative session?
Well, there are a lot of bills being filed that aren't primarily about immigration, but there's the possibility to include or exclude language about, you know, you know, immigration status is not, a factor in determining eligibility for this, that, or the other thing, and ensuring that kind of language stays in there. Yeah, and and there's the possibility of some funding. Watching bills around funding for border safety. And which doesn't end up really making anyone safer. So you will be keeping an eye on those as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vanessa, and eager to see how the Huddle is going to be able to make some movement in positive areas with immigration. Next up, I want to highlight Ash, our LGBTQIA Huddle leader, and some of the things that you're anticipating to work on and prioritize for this upcoming legislative session.
Right. I think, as I mentioned before, I'm counting on having to play a lot of defense, just because with the makeup of the legislature as it is, it's still going to be easier for negative bills to pass than positive ones. I've been keeping an eye on social media for the governor and some of the more conservative members that I usually end up facing each session. And as expected, there's been some bills filed already that target transgender youth in particular, both around ability to transition at a younger age, which is interesting because the bills are written in a way that definitely tells me that folks have no idea what it is to be transgender and young. So there's going to be an education piece around that we're going to have to do, as well as just shutting that bill down in particular. I'm also counting on there being a number of bills that use religious freedom as an excuse to discriminate against transgender people in particular, but also LGBTQIA folks as a whole. We see that every single session, but my particular concern this year is going to be any of the ones that have to do with healthcare, because there are a lot of folks in our community that live in poverty who do not have access to very good insurance or health resources as a whole, and we're in a pandemic. So we have to make sure that we have as many protections as possible so that our folks are not getting sick and dying. So have to look out for that. Besides defense, I intend to talk a little bit to the LGBTQIA Caucus that the legislature has and make sure that we are supporting their initiatives and the bills that they want to get passed. I know that there's going to be a lot of energy around ending conversion therapy. So that should be a pretty cool effort that we can get behind, as well as ending the gay and trans panic defense, which is a criminal justice issue where folks try to say that it was okay that they attacked and or killed somebody in the community because they were surprised to find out that they had a sexual orientation or gender identity that was different than what they expected. Both of those bills have traditionally gotten hearings. The hope is that we can get them even further along on the House side and maybe get a floor vote or something like that. Additionally, we will be working with groups like Equality Texas and Transgender Education Network of Texas and making sure that we are assisting them in their legislative goals. I know for Equality Texas, that looks like supporting an omnibus bill that would provide protections to our community in a number of areas where we're still lacking them, including public accommodations and housing. I don't know how far we'll be able to take that bill this session, but we will do everything that we can to get it as far as possible. Last session we got a hearing, but my understanding was the committee that heard that bill didn't take it very seriously. So if we can at least change the perception of that bill as something that is important and necessary and needs to have a serious conversation around it, I think that would count as a victory in our books. So there's a whole lot that we'll be looking at this session in terms of both offense and defense. I think our number one goal is still going to have to be defense. There's just too many kids that are depending on us to keep them safe for us to be focusing on anything else. But I'm optimistic because ever since the bathroom bill, there's been a growing movement of people throughout the state that have become really interested in legislative advocacy. And so my hope is that we can take that energy, push it into Indivisible, and get folks connected with the resources that they need to make their voices heard. And I'm extremely proud to be part of this group and to work with all of you on that.
Thanks so much, Ash, for those updates. And I definitely hope, everybody out there hope that, with 2017, the state legislature, we saw some of the ugliest bills that we've seen here recently. In 2019, the tone really shifted because of the electoral outcomes that happened with, especially in the House, all the seats that were changed and flipped. And while there wasn't as much movement in the 2020 election, for the 2021 legislative session, the hope is that we stay on that trajectory to where we have more focus around doing good things for Texans, that we're trying to improve things versus some of those destructive bills that we saw in 2017. So definitely the defense is still going to be important, but it'll be exciting if we gradually in each of these huddles, and especially in the huddle you're leading, Ash, that we can move a little bit more in the offensive area.
Yeah, that's the hope. I have optimism about it, so we'll see what happens.
Well, thanks so much, Ash. Next, I want to go to Cheryl, who is our Reproductive Rights Huddle lead. And what are some of the things you're looking ahead for, the legislative session and some of the priorities?
Sure. Well, let me just start with a caveat by saying I took over this position about 48 hours ago. So I haven't had a lot of time to plan, but just generally going through, I will also echo what you said about the legislator, and we did make progress in that we didn't get a lot of bad bills last session because of the change in the electoral system. And so they were not as aggressive as they've been in the past. We hope that continues, but this group needs to have their nose inside the Texas legislature online, the TLO, every day to see what's popping up, because they throw some little doozy out there all the time. And the minute we find one, we need to be able to act on it and start making calls. While the other thing that I want to keep an eye on, which is not necessarily Indivisible TX Lege, but certainly reproductive rights, is all the sanctuary city for the unborn local things that are going on. And I expect to be able to harness some of the energy with my group in TX Lege to put some pressure on the legislatures for those local city and county, and actually give some exposure and just some, warm bodies to call and kind of pressure those local governments that want to try one of those little doozies. And like I said, we'll be working with T-Fund, the Jane's Due Process, Planned Parenthood, NARAL, every other group that we can get together with and use some synergy to get some action there. If we can go offensive and get some of these older bills taken off, that would be amazing. If we can get Medicare and Medicaid to let Planned Parenthood back in, I know there's some movement there. We don't quite know what's going on yet. Like I said, in the past, I've always gone down there and done testimony. I've done legislative sessions, meeting, lobby days. We just don't know how that's going to happen in 2020, but we're willing to be flexible and get in their faces regardless somehow, even if it's a Zoom face, we'll be there. So that's my plan for reproductive rights.
Awesome, Cheryl. And yeah, I want to give a special shout out to you, Cheryl, because in 48 hours, you have been in meeting after meeting, getting ramped up and getting connected and really starting that outline work and getting the pieces in place for the reproductive rights huddle. So having you jump in and just the wealth of knowledge and background that you bring to the table, really excited about this huddle and the work that you guys are going to be able to do. And it's a great segue into what we're going to talk about next, which is the 2021 legislative session and what it's going to look like. Cheryl, you brought up the great point about getting in the Zoom face of our legislators, which may be a real thing, and we need to get a catchy name for that kind of work.
Yeah.
I like that. We just heard from the governor just a few days ago that the plan is to open the Capitol on January 4th. And there's a big announcement that he made. There's still a lot of concern amongst Texans because of the way COVID is continuing to increase, the anticipation that it's going to continue to increase after the holiday and New Year. And so January 4th could be actually one of the worst times for a lot of people converging on the Capitol all at once after this series of the holiday season. But with that possibility still staying in place, of course, there's always a chance the governor could change his mind. There's been some calls to action that we've made for people to push for virtual testimony so that Texans can engage virtually if they don't feel comfortable being at the Capitol while we're still in the middle of a pandemic. What are some of the things that y'all are hearing, or some of the things that you're hoping to see for the 2021 legislative session? And this is really open for anybody who wants to jump in. Feel free.
I can go first if folks would like.
Go for it, Ash.
Yeah. So I've had a couple of meetings now with legislators as part of a separate legislative group that I'm a part of. And a lot of what I've been hearing is that there's a lot of hybrid models being considered for testimony where folks would have the opportunity to either show up in person. There would just be a limited number of people who would be able to do that, and it would just kind of be first come, first serve. As well as a digital component where folks would indeed be on Zoom or something comparable where they could also make their voices heard. Lots of inconsistencies as to what that might look like, and it's entirely possible that the House and the Senate will have completely different methods for how they decide to go about that. Something that we do have that I think is going to be helpful in terms of making predictions is actually on the Senate side. The Senate Redistricting Committee was supposed to be holding public input hearings this whole time to get ideas for how our new political maps should be drawn. That didn't happen during the pandemic, and so they're very behind on that. What they've developed in the meantime is a digital portal that folks can visit online where they go ahead and enter in written testimony as if they were in person at a hearing, and it does get counted as actual testimony and gets entered into the state record. And so my understanding from the chairwoman of that committee is she's going to be bringing that up on day one, make that sort of an official thing at the very least for that committee. My guess is that at least on the Senate side, we'll probably see more things like that. I don't know if the House will adopt something similar. I know that they've been meeting a lot over the past couple of weeks to kind of finalize what they think is going to be the best method for hearing from Texans. But that is most of the intel that I have, is that it's probably going to be hybrid and that there's already portals and the like that are being created that will make it easier for folks to have their words entered into the state record.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash.
Well, I can say I've talked to a few legislators, people that are, friends of mine for a while, and both of them have said that they're going to have to pay a lot of attention to office visits and how legislators and key staff connect with people. Like one legislator was saying, I'm going to make sure that my staff can work remotely as much as possible because I don't want them to have to risk their health in order to be my employee. And that sounds like a great thing to me. On the other hand, there are members, I will say most of them conservative Republicans, who take a very cavalier attitude towards this and feel like it's okay to come to my office. You don't have to wear a mask. So the risk we have is 150 different safety guidelines because there's 150 House members, and at some point, a speaker is going to have to, and the House Administration Committee is going to have to say, okay, well, here's some basics that we want you to follow. I'm sorry, but we don't want you to invite people into the Capitol that have COVID and they're just walking around. So there's going to have to be some basic things going on here, I would hope. And not this kind of, whatever you want to do attitude, is going to rule the day. That just won't fly. Because I can tell you, for one of my Huddle members said, Robert, I don't want to go to the Capitol because I have young kids. I don't want to bring anything back to them. And that said, no, I just, fine. There's a lot you can do with Text Lege that's online. Cheryl mentioned one already. That's Texas Legislature Online. You can watch committee hearings online. You can watch floor proceedings online. You can get information about bills. When committee hearings are going to come up, you can set up your own personal alert system to do this. You really want to make sure you've got that, knowledge in hand and the ability to do that before the session starts. Because the more you do that now, the more you'll get familiar with it and you'll know how to use it. So you can set up alerts. Like I have alerts coming in about legislation that's pre-filed on specific categories. You can do all of that through Texas Legislature Online. I will say it's not always an easy to follow system, but it works, and it works for a lot of people, and it works for me, and I'm not particularly tech savvy. So I would just say check that out and start using it now.
Great insight, Robert.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts around 2021? What you're hearing around what we may be, dealing with working with the legislature or advocating in that space, or what do you hope to see during this session?
I think at this point, we need to be flexible and we need to see what's happening in January and how they will exactly conduct their business. And I guess we have to plan for different types of things depending on what they decide they will do.
Yeah, that is good encouragement and good advice.
I think in some ways, folks have an unprecedented opportunity to actually make their voices heard because everything is starting to go digital. And so my biggest hope is that we have more involvement in this session from everyday Texans than any other in history. I'm not the kind of person to say the bright side of the pandemic or anything like that, but the fact that we are expanding digital capacity in state government in a way that benefits everybody is pretty awesome. And so I have high hopes for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't want to have my dire warnings make people feel bad about the legislative process. I totally agree with Heiko and with Ash. There is a lot of opportunities this time around, and I think Ash is right. Watching online and being able to provide online testimony will just be an amazingly great opportunity for so many people. It just depends on how they're going to do it. What kind of rules and perhaps constraints they're going to be working under when they do it. But and Heiko is right. Go with the flow. Take a weekend and chill.
Vanessa, I see you unmuted, so I want to check in with you to see if there's anything you wanted to add to this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the possibilities for increased digital and remote access. The State Board of Education had a lot of hearings this fall, that were virtual because of the pandemic, and and with that, we really saw that it was successful and a lot more people were able to make their voices heard about what was important to them, who normally wouldn't be able to spend 3 days attending, an SBOE hearing in person in Austin because our state is so huge. And I know the legislature has a similar, usually the barrier to entry can be pretty steep because you have to physically be at the Capitol. So I'm hopeful that we can use that to our advantage.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I want to share about Indivisible TX Lege is that we've always kind of been working virtually because our state is so huge, like what Vanessa said, and it is, very few times where we'll try to organize something for people to all come together because we're all over the state. And so another reason, another benefit of being a part of Indivisible TX Lege is you kind of build up those virtual organizing skills that are needed, not only for a state our size, but during this unique legislative session that we're going to have. And as you all said, hopefully the potential of more digital interaction, remote interaction. Well, this conversation has been amazing to have with all of you. I hope everybody who gets to watch this gets to see the collection of just passion and talent and expertise that is coming together under Indivisible TX Lege to really try to bring as many people together as possible. We want to be a part of the network, the connective tissue of all these different efforts. We're a completely volunteer organization right now, and so leaning on some of our partners that have paid staff, that have lawyers on their staff, that have policy directors on their staff, we really want to be able to amplify that work because they're busy doing all of that expertise work in that space. But we have the fortunate position of being connected to a lot of different groups and networks within the state of Texas and continue to grow that network. And so we want to be able to get the information transferred to as many Texans as possible so that they understand the priorities, the opportunities, and the things that we can do to make a difference during this legislative session. And a part of helping us kick off the legislative session and 2021 as a whole, we want to invite everybody to our event that we're going to have January 9th, which is, let's see, let me pull up my screen one more time so I can tell you the name of it with a visual image as well. And so Indivisible TX Lege is going to have a 2021 kickoff party on Saturday, January 9th from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Anybody in Texas can join this party that we're going to have. We're going to highlight information around our work, where we're organizing, but also we're going to have some fun. And so Lauren is going to be a big part of helping us organize this fun that we're going to have. And we're really excited to just have a kickoff party to where, we'll talk about things that we're going to be accomplishing so you can be informed. But we also want to have a space where we can get together, relax, get to know each other, have fun, and continue to build the relationships that we don't get to do as much because we're not in person. And sometimes in person, it would be easier just to grab a bite to eat and relax around a table and get to know each other. But we have a fun game plan called Spark. Within our event, there's a Zoom link for you to register so that you will get the information on how to connect. So join us in our 2021 kickoff party. It's going to be a great time, and we hope to see as many people there as possible. Who here is excited for the kickoff party? Well, we're going to keep chipping away at our work. We want to keep recruiting and bringing people on board so that you can help support these huddle leaders and support these issues, because these issues and the progress we can make are so important for Texans all across the state. Before we sign off for the day, any final message any of our huddle leaders want to share with everybody out there?
Okay, I guess I'll just say the best part of doing this work is that we don't do it alone. I love the community that comes from this, and I'm excited for it to grow. So come join us and jump into the action with us.
Let's get busy.
I think we're ready to rock.
All right. Well, thank you so much for y'all's time today. I know you guys are busy working away. The holidays coming up as well. So try to find some time to relax in between as we ramp up. We kind of have to do these two things at once. And we'll be seeing each other very often and very soon throughout the coming weeks and months. And anybody out there, if you have questions for Indivisible TX Lege, connect with us and let us know. We hope everyone has a great rest of their day.